he starts going a little harder. I start going a little harder. And we ended up going about a 25, 30 minutes, chain fest back and forth in the wrestling, in the ring. And he came over and he shook my hand. He said, I didn't think you knew what you were doing. He said, he looked at Ted, he knows what the he's doing.
The Eliminators and the Dudley Boys, Bubba and Devon. I want to make mention of this, that Bubba actually had a broken ankle in this, which may go some way to explaining why. Because when I was watching it, the Eliminators took about 95% of the match, and then they won clean. I was like,
yeah,
that was stunning, quite frankly. I mean, I don't remember the last time I've ever seen a match like that. I want to highlight, and jump in as well with anything else from the match you want to bring up, but I want to highlight Perry Saturn, because I always felt when I was a kid watching that Perry Saturn was something special that never maybe got his due, more so than Kronus, dare I say more so than the Dudley Boys. I always thought Perry was great. He could fly almost as well as Sabu. He had great suplexes like Taz. He looked insane. Yeah. I don't mean to be so generic here, but give us some stories about Perry, but specifically how talented Perry was, because I really rated him when I was young.
I agree with everything you just said. I had forgotten, Perry has been vast portions of my career. And then, like we were talking last night at the building, none of us have seen him for forever. Last I saw him, we were me, Francine, Sandman, New Jack, Perry. We were doing a sit down interview in Philadelphia. He looked great then, looked good. He was telling me the stories of him getting shot in Atlanta. And, I'd heard stories that he had been homeless, and then other people told me that wasn't true, but none of us has a finger on his pulse. None of us know exactly where he is or what he's doing. And if you're out there listening, Perry, please reach out to me. I would love to connect with him. In watching that match last night, I was from 95 forward. When I came back, I was intimately aware of Perry Saturn, but I got to admit, watching that match yesterday and watching how seamlessly he was doing some of those flying moves, I'd completely forgotten that part of it. And I think the reason is because when I first came back, you can imagine from these guys, they'd heard all these stories about Shane Douglas and what they had seen. He's been gone. Now here he is back. And like I said, egos in our business, right? Perry wanted to see if I really knew what I was doing in the ring. So they're having the workout during the day, and I go out and he starts pawing around. We start playing, and he starts going a little harder. I start going a little harder. And we ended up going about a 25, 30 minutes, chain fest back and forth in the wrestling, in the ring. And he came over and he shook my hand. He said, I didn't think you knew what you were doing. He said, he looked at Ted, he knows what the fuck he's doing. So, there was that kind of relationship with us that we had always gotten along. And in some respects, there were times when we also butted heads. But, Perry really did fit into that whole ECW paradigm. John Kronus, too. I mean, John, if for anybody out there that didn't know John, and watching him last night, again, the stuff, it's there in the back of your brain, but you watch it. Moose was asking me last night, when's the last time you watched it? I said, God, it's probably been 10 or 15 years that I've watched through that. But so in time, like you sort of like some of those stories and those memories get sort of locked in the back of your head someplace. And watching Kronus coming out and, his pawning around with Perry and arms over, over his head, looking at the camera and, playing off that, and then getting into the ring and seeing how at 6'1" or 265 pounds, he seamlessly moved around that ring. And when you worked with him, he was light as a feather. Like if you had to belly him, it was just like picking, a sack of potatoes up. It was, simple. And just how jovial his character was. At times watching yesterday, there's a bit of melancholy because I'm realizing this guy's gone, that guy's gone, this guy's gone. And Kronus was one of those guys that was just so endearing. Like you liked being around him. And, and then being in the ring with him, when Perry Saturn first left to go to WCW, we were working in Wonderland in Boston, Revere. And Paul had me booked against Kronus. And rare for Paul to do this, he pulled me in and said, right before the match, he said, I need you to make him before you take him. Because it was going to be his first match as a singles. And I was in my head thinking of a way, like, could we slide him over and somehow reverse it or, steal it from him, elevating him a little bit more. And we went out there and he was very, very nervous. It's the first time he wrestled in the singles in years. And I ultimately just said to him, just listen to me. We're going to have fun out there. And he did. He listened to everything. And there's a point in the match where, like, when you have somebody that's hesitant and you see them starting to get more and more comfortable with you, then it just sort of falls into place. And I remember vividly in the match when that happened, and it just became thump and just laying this match out. And we got back and he gave me a great big hug. He had cleared that hurdle of being in a tag and finally could prove that he could do his singles. But he and Perry, in watching that, my takeaway was the same as yours, because I had watched it in so long, and watching them go over it wasn't flat at the finish. It just felt awkward when the finish came, when it did in the way that it did. In hindsight, looking at it, I was telling Moose on the way back, I wouldn't have done it this way. This would have been more backstage to me or whatever. But realizing that this is the first pay-per-view, and mentioned about Paul having to fight for his director and his producer or camera guy. That was because those guys keenly understood the product. They were an integral part of the team. And they knew, based off of, like I said, with Joey and me commentating, they knew where if Bubba's doing a particular thing in the ring, they know what's coming next because they know Bubba's style. So in watching that, I was unaware until you just said it that Bubba had the broken ankle at the time. But he did seem to be moving around a bit slow in the ring for as much as he could move, because that big bastard could move when he wanted to back then. Still can, but I mean, especially back then.
And dance, I believe.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes. And, but the match itself felt awkward. And then the afterbirth with Joel, to me, looked so ill-placed. It looked so contrived. That should have been something that was done in a different way. But again, we're sitting almost 25, 26 years later, and can play Monday morning quarterback. With a pay-per-view, you rarely have that luxury, almost never, and especially in a company like ECW, that was just sort of, okay, that piece is behind us. Let's move on and get to the next thing on the list.